Oi, good to see you again, boys and girls. I'm Molly from the Night Gardener. And remember, my brother and I have finally gotten to the manor, the Windsor Manor. And there's a tree growing in the house, and the little girl there is really nice. But the woman of the house, she's mean. She don't like me now. So we're going to see in these chapters 4 and 5 what the woman thinks of Kip and I, and what she offers us as far as if we stay as workers or not. Because she didn't seem to like the way I was talking to her daughter or her student, because I'm not sure if she's a mom or a teacher. Now, we're going to hear some words and I'm going to introduce them to you in just a moment, and hopefully we'll have some more mystery and stuff in the story. So the first word we're going to hear is basin, and that is just a bowl with a wide bottom and kind of shallow that a lot of people use to wash their face. They put water into it and they wash their face that way, or it can be for another liquid. Another word you're going to hear is marred, and marred just means something that's beautiful is ruined because of something else. The perfection of it is ruined. Phantom, you guys probably know that phantom would mean a ghost. Neglected just means something's not taken care of, and it seems like this house could have been grand a long time ago, but it hasn't been taken care of by anyone, even by this new family. Suppressing means to quiet someone down with force or with a threat or by yelling at them. Or you can also hold someone back from doing something with a threat or yelling at them. Mocking means that you're making fun of someone, that you're not telling them the truth in order to hurt them because you don't like them or have any respect for them. And then we have must, M-U-S-S-E-D. And that just means you take your hand and you kind of move your hand back and forth over something and you're kind of messing it up. Like I like to put my hand over my brother's head and muss his hair. That means I rub my hand back and forth because I like him and care about him. So it's kind of a sign of affection. It's kind of a sign that you like someone, but you're messing up their hair and messing something up. All right, so we're going to start with chapter 4, and I will be back to do some more words for chapter 5 because there's a lot of them. Okay, enjoy, and I hope it doesn't get too scary.
Chapter 4, The Help. Molly stood against one wall of the Windsor kitchen. It was a large space with a walk-in pantry, brick furnace, dumbwaiter, and 2 service stairs. Kip, who had been called in from the yard, was leaning beside her. Constance Windsor paced in front of them, hands clasped together, shoulders erect.
Have you and I met before?
The woman fixed her dark eyes on Molly, awaiting an answer.
No, Mum,
Molly said. The woman paused, brushing something invisible from the lace on her sleeve. Behind her were 2 children, Penny and an older boy, who looked extremely bored.
And when you approached this property, did I greet you and say, "Come in"?
No, Mum, Molly said, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. She could feel her brother watching her, his eyes full of questions. She reached down and gently squeezed his hand.
Interesting.
Constance heeled around for another lap.
And yet, I find you inside my home, uninvited, already unpacked, telling my daughter goodness knows what kind of nonsense about monsters and amorous clergymen.
Even though she had not asked a question, the woman looked as though she expected an answer. Molly shifted her weight, feeling the cold stone floor through the hole in her right boot.
It was just a story, Mum. I didn't mean nothing by it.
Penny, who had been listening from a safe distance on the far corner, hopped to the floor. Mummy, you're not being fair. I was the one who let her in. Constance gave her daughter a stern look, and the girl climbed back to her perch. The woman rubbed her temple, speaking slowly.
Surely you can appreciate how this looks from my perspective.
Molly opened her mouth, but she was having trouble forming a response. At the present, she appreciated almost nothing. In the last half hour, what she knew, or thought she knew, about this house in this position had been turned on its head. "Forgive me, Mum," she finally said. "I think there's been some sort of confusion. We was hired by an agency at the behest of your husband, Master Windsor." "Were you?" Constance creased her lips. "I'm afraid that you, the agency, and my husband were mistaken. I have told him repeatedly, as I am telling you now, that I neither need nor want servants in my home. As you can see, I am managing just fine on my own." Under the circumstances, Molly would have admired a woman who so boldly contradicted her husband, but now it only felt like some wicked joke. One look at the room they stood in revealed how little this woman knew about keeping house. The floors were thick with dust and grime, the walls stained with mildew. Crumbs and spilled food covered every surface. Dirty pans and dishes spilled out over the basin. Molly had spent her whole life scrubbing and cooking alongside her mother. She knew what a well-maintained house looked like. This was not it. "I say, you have them both arrested." "I say you have them both arrested. They're dirty and they smell like fish." The comment came from the boy, leaning on the counter beside Penny. He looked about Molly's age. Like Penny and Constance, he had pale skin and dark hair. Unlike them, however, he was exceedingly ugly. His white face was marred with pimples, and his deep-set eyes were connected by thick eyebrows that met in the middle to create a single line. He was presently digging through a bag of toffees, apparently trying to stuff as many pieces as he could into his mouth at once. Constance turned toward him, her face filled with some complicated emotion that Molly couldn't name. "Alistair, what have I told you about sweets before supper?" The boy rolled his eyes and spit the whole glob of chewed toffee back into his bag. It was disgusting, a disgusting sight, but food was food, and it was all Molly could do, not to stare. "Luckily for the pair of you," Mr. Windsor went on, "I cannot heed my son's advice. There are no such authorities in this backward place. If you leave immediately, I shall consider the matter done with. As you can see, I have children enough to care for already. Surely you and your brother can find jobs in town." Molly felt a hot flush of blood prickle her cheeks. Did this woman honestly think that they would have come all this way if that were true? She had spent weeks knocking on doors, begging for work, then for food, then for mercy. At every turn, people had made it clear they did not want her kind. "There are no jobs in the city," she said. "Not for us. If it's a question of money, we'll work for room and board. You don't even need to pay us." Constance cut her off. "We do not need your charity." She said this with such force that Molly stepped back. Who had said anything about charity? "Mum, I gather your family lived in town before moving out here. If ever you walked a street after dark, surely you know what kind of work falls to those in our desperate position. Please, if you knew what we've gone through these last weeks, all that we've happened." She could have said more, much more, but not with her brother beside her. She shook her head, eyes brimming. "My brother's house is fragile. He's fragile." She knew Kip would hate her for talking of him like this, but she had no choice. "We're only asking for a chance." The woman studied Molly for a long moment. "How old are you, child?" she said, her voice softer. "Mommy," Penny said, mortified, "don't you know a lady never tells her age?" Constance ignored the rebuke and waited for an answer. Molly dropped her head. 14, Mum." When she had applied in town, she had told the solicitor she was 16. "I know it's young, but I swear to you, I work harder than 10 grown-ups put together. My brother and me was brought up hard on a farm. I've kept my house my whole life, and Kip can grow anything. He's got 10 green fingers and toes to match. Why, give him a month, and he'll have these grounds looking like your own personal Eden." "That and then some," Kip said, standing tall beside her. Molly smiled down at him and mussed his hair. Constance watched, her eyes pained, perhaps understanding for the first time the weight of duty upon Molly's shoulders. 14, she said, as much to herself as anyone. "And your parents, what of them?" Molly glanced down at Kip and then back to Constance. What could she say to make this woman understand? "Our Marn and Da, they got slowed down a bit on the way over from Ireland. We're on our own." "Goodness, I hope it's nothing serious." If Molly didn't know better, she might have thought the woman was genuinely concerned. "Oh, it's very serious," Kip said, eyes wide. Constance raised an eyebrow at Molly, awaiting further explanation. Molly swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Well, Mum, it seems that, as fate would have it, our folks was kidnapped by pirates. They forced them to join a work crew or else walk the plank," Kip said, a proud smile on his face, "just like young St. Patrick." "How extraordinary," Constance said, her voice growing colder. Molly wanted to say something, to explain that she wasn't mocking the woman, but she could only stare at her, eyes wide, trying to say with her face which she could not speak aloud. "Please, Mum," she managed. "We've got no one to turn to." The woman blinked, shaking her head. "You do not know what you're asking, child. This house is no place for you." She said this without any bitterness. For a brief moment it occurred to Molly that perhaps this woman did not want to be in this place either. Constance kept her head down as she walked past Molly. "I suggest you leave before it gets dark." She opened the back door. Molly stared at the wilderness waiting for her outside. Cold air rushed in from the door, cutting straight through her coat, rattling her bones. She watched Kip as he fixed his crutch under his arm and hobbled to her side, suppressing a shiver. Even in this moment, he was a picture of courage. "Not yet," Molly said, turning back to Constance. "Mum, we'll go just like you told us, out into the wild, not a word of protest, but before we do, will you hear one thing?" If the woman had looked closely, she would have seen a tiny spark burning in the ring of Molly's eyes. "I suppose you're going to tell me that I'm wicked, and I'm a wicked person," she said. Molly shook her head. "No, Mum, I'm going to tell you a story." She swallowed, pushing away her fear and exhaustion so that she could focus on this woman in front of her, a woman who, like all people, longed to hear something that they had once known but since forgotten. "Imagine waking up tomorrow, like you always do," she began. "Only there's something a bit different. At first it's just a faint sound, a whistle from the back of your ear. The sound gets louder, and you realize it's a kettle calling for tea." Molly spoke with a hypnotic lilt, and behind her voice you could almost make out the song of the kettle. You open your eyes to a room flooded with warm sunlight. The curtains is already drawn apart, and your windows wide. You stretch and yawn, fresh air filling your lungs. Your clothes is already pressed and waiting for you, and there, on the mantel, a jar of fresh-cut flowers from your very own garden. Molly saw Constance close her eyes and take a deep breath, as if smelling the phantom bouquet in the warm morning air. You sit up, and your nose catches a delicious waft of hot sausages crackling in a pan and fresh brown rolls browning in the oven, and then all of a sudden there's a polite knock at the door, and her voice trailed off. "And?" Constance said after a moment. Molly shrugged. "Afraid you'll have to hear the rest tomorrow?" The woman blinked, looking surprised at her surroundings as if for the first time. Her eyes drifted from the dirty floor to the stained counter to the neglected pots and finally to her own children huddled by the stove. "You never make us sausages," Alastair muttered. Penny slid down from the counter and rushed to Molly's side, hands clasped together. Mummy, please, can't we, please? She took a breath. Please keep them. Molly smiled down at Penny, this sweet little girl who wanted her when no one else did. She put an arm around her and faced Constance. The woman shook her head and loosed a long breath. She shut the back door. You will start this evening. She wrinkled her nose. But first, baths.
So here we are, on to chapter 5. And of course I have some more words for you. So terse, that is being very brief when you're speaking to someone, going right to the point and not talking around in circles. Mistress, that just means that if you're a servant, the woman of the house who runs the house, she is your mistress, she is your boss, and she's a female, of course. Cripple, that just means someone who has to walk with a cane, or someone who walks with a limp, or they can't walk at all because they have some type of injury to their hip or to their legs. Contradicting, that means that you say the opposite of someone, that you're arguing with them, and that you think they're wrong. Unaccustomed just means you're not used to something, that it's different than what you normally do. An eccentric, that means someone who's unusual and they kind of have peculiar or strange behaviors or ideas. They live a little bit differently than a lot of other people who just live in the normal way. Sometimes people who are geniuses are eccentric because they're so smart, so they do lots of things differently than others. Alright, so here we go into chapter 5, and you're going to find out more about this family and this woman who is not very nice, and why maybe they are not very nice, and what in the house might be affecting them. Alright, enjoy, and I see you at the end.
Chapter 5, Portrait of a Lady. Whatever warming effect Molly's story might have had on her new mistress, it did not last very long. The woman was as cold and impersonal as ever during her tour of the house and grounds. Breakfast at 8, tea at 11, supper at 6, she said, moving briskly through the downstairs rooms. I want new linens on the table before every meal. You shall cook from recipes I choose. You can read, can't you? Molly struggled to keep up. Well enough, Mum, she said, pinning back a strand of her still damp hair. The bath had been her first in ages, and even though the water was cold, it felt wonderful to be clean. She was wearing a worn maid's uniform that was clearly meant for someone several years older and several pounds heavier. She adjusted her apron and followed the woman into the hall. As you can see, I haven't had time to properly unpack our things, Constance said, passing some furniture and crates along the wall. See that you take care of it. Yes, Mum, Molly said. This phrase had quickly become the girl's answer to nearly every command, even if Molly had wanted to ask a question about one of her tasks. Mistress Windsor moved so quickly that there was scarcely time. Chamber pots cleaned by 10. Yes, Mum. Floors scrubbed twice weekly. Yes, Mum. Silver polished every month. Yes, Mum. Yes, Mum. Yes, Mum. Molly repeated these words until they were burned into her mind. She felt certain she would hear Yes, Mum in her dreams, pounding against her skull like a drum. And what about that room there, Mum? Molly asked, pointing to a rather smallish green door at the top of the stairs, which Constance had passed without comment. Unlike most other doors in the house, this one did not have a simple latch, but instead boasted large iron bolt, the sort used to secure safes and storehouses. You needn't concern yourself with that door. I don't even think we have the key. She gestured towards some muddy boot tracks in front of the bedrooms. Do clean those up when you get a chance. Despite her terse manner, Mistress Windsor possessed a refined quality that appealed to Molly. Molly had not had much opportunity to mix with the higher class of society, and watching this woman was a rare glimpse into another world. Her clothes were not only well made, but beautiful. The dark folds of her skirt hung from her slender frame at a perfect angle, ending just above but never touching the floor. From her delicate neck and wrists hung diamond jewelry, the likes of which Molly had never seen before. Even her movements were elegant. Like a picture come alive, she thought to herself. Mistress Windsor's fine appearance was made all the more stark by her surroundings. The woman looked completely out of place in this distress and crumbling house, and Molly suspected that her occasional comments about their previous dwellings in town were spoken with a touch of longing. Every so often, Constance tried to engage Molly in what seemed to be her version of a friendly conversation. These exchanges usually didn't go very well.
"Your brother,"
she said, mounting the stairs.
"How long has he been a cripple?"
Molly gritted her teeth.
"He was born that way,"
she said, trying not to let her irritation creep into her reply.
"Leg turned in on itself."
The woman waved a dismissive hand.
"Well, whatever it is, I don't want the children catching it. He's to sleep in the stables."
Molly slowed.
"The stables, Mom."
Her brother's health was worsening. He needed to sleep in a warm bed, not in some drafty shack with animals.
"Or the woodshed, if he prefers."
"He's only 10, Mum." Molly knew she should not speak out loud, but she couldn't help it.
"There's plenty of beds in the servants' quarters. Surely he can sleep in one of those rooms down there."
Constance faced her.
"Out of the question. There's a reasonable fear of illness in this home. It wouldn't be the first time sickness has spread inside these walls."
Molly thought instantly of what the old storyteller had mentioned out in the hollow about Master Windsor being sent off to town as a boy.
"The other thing,"
she had called it, and Molly...
Molly, Constance said, stepping closer, "I am unaccustomed to having my orders questioned. If you so much as think of contradicting me again, you and your brother will find yourselves out in the cold before the words even leave your mouth. Are we clear?"
Molly stared at the woman, cheeks burning.
"Yes, Mom."
Constance brightened, smiling.
"Excellent. Follow me, then."
It was nearly evening by the time Mistress Windsor concluded her tour in the library on the second floor. It was a large room with furniture covered in grey tarpaulin sheets that was stiff with age.
"My husband spends much of his time in town, and so we have little use for a study."
She pulled apart the heavy curtains to light the room.
"You can see a dusting is in order."
The space looked to Molly like it had not been occupied in some time. The high walls were filled to the ceiling with old books. Molly, who had dreamed many times of being in possession of so rare a thing as a book, was overwhelmed.
"Is Master Windsor a scholar, Mom?"
she asked.
"A scholar? Heavens, no."
She said this with the passion of someone who had just been asked if her husband were in the circus.
"These books belong to Bertrand's father. I understand he was something of an eccentric."
There was an audible gust of wind, sighed, and a branch from the giant tree tapped against the window behind Molly. She moved away from the glass, slightly unnerved. It seemed that wherever she turned in the house, there was the tree.
"You know, Mom, I could have my brother prune back some of them branches. Maybe patch the walls where it broke through." "Would that we could,"
Constance said lightly.
"Unfortunately, the tree has grown too close to the house. Disturbing it might threaten the foundations. Surely clipping back a few branches wouldn't—"
Constance cut her off.
"And in no circumstances are you or your brother to touch the tree,"
she said, her voice like an icicle.
"Do you understand?"
"Yes, Mom." Molly could feel her cheeks flushing again. She had only meant to be helpful. Just when it seemed like her mistress was becoming kinder, the woman would lash out at her for no good reason. She scanned the room with her eyes. trying not to let Constance see her frustration. And that was when she noticed the portrait. It was a large painting, almost up to Molly's shoulders. It leaned against the fireplace mantel, waiting to be hung. The impressive gold frame was wrapped in protective cloth that had come undone on one side, leaving it half-dressed, like a Roman emperor. Behind the cloth, Molly could make out the 4 members of the Windsor family, Constance, Alistair, Penny, and a man she took to be Master Windsor. Only it wasn't the family as she knew them. Their faces were plump and healthy, with bright eyes and ruddy cheeks. Instead of dark hair, they all had chestnut curls. Molly studied the painting, unsure of what to make of the image. It was one thing for an artist to flatter his patrons, but this seemed altogether different.
"Is something the matter?"
Constance said, startling her. Molly looked at the face of the woman standing beside her. It was the same mouth, eyes, and nose, only now her skin had lost its color. Her once blue eyes were pools of black ink. Compared to the figure in the painting, Constance looked drained and frail. Is that you, Mom?" she said, pointing to the portrait.
"Who else would it be, child? We had it painted last summer, just before moving here, in fact."
Last summer? Molly marveled at the idea at how the woman could have looked so different only a few months before. Constance stiffened, feeling Molly's eyes on her. She touched the back of her dark, straight hair.
"Perhaps it's time you started supper,"
she said, and walked away. Molly remained. Behind a moment, a breeze wuthered through the house, and the tree outside scraped against the glass, almost as if it wanted to come in. She inched back a step, looking again at the painting. The 4 faces in the portrait smiled out at her, happy and healthy. Something sinister was changing these people, and they didn't even seem to know it. Molly covered the portrait and retreated into the hall.
So in chapters 4 and 5, we've learned that the mother of the Windsor family, she is not very nice. She's actually rather mean. She was going to kick Kip and I out into the cold night and let us sleep outside. And then she was going to make us go look for another job because she said she didn't want us in her house. And also, the only way I got her to keep us was to tell her the story of her remembering how it is to have servants and to have someone to take care of you, because nobody there looked like they had been taken care of. And that house, it just needs such a cleaning and needs somebody to care for it. Really sad. Then in chapter 5, when she's giving me the tour, the entire house needs a deep clean. And I noticed just some strange stuff. There's a room that she says they don't have a key to, and it's a rather strange looking door. So I wonder what's behind that door. I wonder if we'll ever... Also in chapter 5, this woman, she says she wants Kip to sleep out in the stables, and that would be very bad for him because of his health. So I don't know what I'm going to be able to do. She wouldn't let me change her mind. She didn't like me contradicting her either and trying to tell her otherwise. So I'm going to have to think of something for that to protect him. And then when we went into the main room, I saw the painting, and that painting was of the family, and they look completely different. Why would they look so different? Now they're all dark. Their hair's dark, their eyes are dark, their skin's pale. They've all lost weight. So what could be causing them to do this? Plus the tree, she won't let us cut any branches of the tree that are coming into the house. Why would that be? This family's a little bit loony, I think. Now, we'll read the next few chapters next week, find out more about the Windsor family. Wonder if their father's going to be any different than this mom, who is actually pretty mean and is not kind, has no compassion for anyone. So, just keep listening and watching and leaving comments. Let your library teacher, Miss Bell, know if you're liking it. And you can go to Schoology and answer questions and share your opinions and maybe even tell what you think is going to happen in the next chapters. So I'm not going to tell any more. Maybe we'll meet this night gardener if there is such a character. Maybe not. Maybe we'll find out more about any type of ghost or evil that might be in this house. Something's affecting these people. and I guess it's up to me to find out what it is. Alright, see you next week. Bye now.